Welcome on in a Wednesday Locked On Syracuse podcast off a win. Good to be here off a win. It's been a little bit. Syracuse with a convincing win over Pittsburgh. We'll talk about our takeaways from the game, get into Jim Boeheim's rotations because there was some interesting stuff there, and a whole lot more on our Wednesday recap podcast.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single weekday. We are here with you guys, only place for daily SU pods. Today's episode brought to you by NetSuite. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Head to netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA for special end-of-the-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. Tim, Leonard, Tyler Aki here after a 77-61 victory for the Orange, only led by 1 at the half, but some encouraging stuff in the second half, right, Ty? Like they came together defensively, and we thought they were going to beat Pitt pretty easily. It was a little bit tight at times, but I think the second half sort of panned out the way I thought.
Yeah, again, this result is exactly what you were expected. What did we say? We said blowout or bust, right? Kind of for this game, and they blew them out. All right, maybe it wasn't to use the golf analogies, like there's no pictures on the scorecard necessarily. I guess there's kind of is when you see it's only a 1-point lead at the half, because that I guess goes in the box score. But this is the type of win you needed at home, kind of get your groove back. I mean, it's your first win in 2 weeks. I mean, you want to know all the things that have happened in 2 weeks? I mean, it's been a new year. People weren't tweeting their Wordle scores out on Twitter. Brian Flores was still the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Like, lots happened in 2 weeks.
Yeah, the Brian Flores one, I still can't get over. That happened on Monday. We're talking Wednesday morning. That's NFL talk, but still beside myself.
He might be hired by the time Syracuse wins their next game. He might have a new team.
He should be, honestly. Someone should grab him. Your Chicago Bears should grab him, honestly.
They've got an interview.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it felt about as dead as a recent Syracuse basketball game has felt. I mean, I wasn't in the Dome, but just hearing the Dome, seeing it on TV.
You're in the majority of people. People weren't in the Dome.
Yeah, well, it's the perfect storm because it's a weekday game, and it's also falls where it's Pittsburgh, but also Syracuse is on a 3-game losing streak. Then the weather there was about as cold as it's been in a long time in Syracuse. It was cold everywhere yesterday, but I believe that had to affect people's desire to get up and go to the game. And then you also have the COVID stuff that's still sort of a thing. I mean, it is a thing, and I don't know how much it's affecting guidelines of the game. I think you're back to drinking beers in stands. Some fans that were there can probably attest to it better than me, but it's just a perfect storm. Like, I don't know how many people were there
on campus either. That doesn't help.
Right. That's another point. Yeah. It was as dead as I've seen a Dome game watching from TV. And honestly, probably if you were to take all the people that have ever listened to our podcast, I would say the lowest percentage of those people watching a game, right? Like, there were a lot of people that are just like tweeting us. Yeah, I didn't even really watch. Like,
a lot of people said, I'll get to it later. That was, I think, the big tweet that we got. Like, I'll get to it later, because there wasn't a lot of juice. And even when you're watching the game, like, Syracuse was playing really well in the second half. All right. We can't take that away. They played really well in the second half. They're hitting shots, played great defense. I think that's another theme that we can talk about a little bit later, but the defense was good. I know it's Pitt, but the defense has now played pretty well in 3 straight games. And it's like, I don't care. It didn't feel like there was any sort of juice behind this game. And it sucks that we're at that point and it's only mid-January, but we're already at that point where it's like, congrats.
Right. No, I'm glad you brought that up. I think the defense is actually like pretty solid right now. I know that sounds weird to say because you look at the KenPom metrics and everything, but they are sort of rounding a corner, in my opinion. It was Pittsburgh. I'm not going to go crazy. And the first half wasn't great, definitely, but then they come out in the second half. It took Pitt about 9 minutes and like 15 seconds to hit its first field goal of the second half. Part of that is Pittsburgh, but also Jim Boeheim was asked about it post-game, and he said this is the first time that we've won a game because of our defense all season. And he also said that that second half was the best they played all season. And he said something like, it isn't really that close, honestly. Like, that's by far the best we played. So it's easy to do that against Pittsburgh compared to some of the other teams in your conference this year. But I said this before the Pittsburgh game. They're going to go on a run here, I think. I think this is the start of maybe 3 or 4 wins in a row. I guess you got Duke and after you play Florida State and Clemson. So that's going to be a tough game on the road. But I would highlight that Duke game as a very likely scenario as they're going into that game on a 3-game winning streak. And that is sort of the last-ditch effort to try and get yourself back into NCAA tournament conversation. Now, you always have the ACC tournament, so the more momentum you build going into that, the better. But I really think this team has played solid in the last 3 games. It's just they were so far behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, and listen, after that Duke game, you're teeing yourself up for potentially 5 more wins after that. Like, Ken Palm's projecting 5 straight wins after the Duke game too. So if you can take care of business against Florida State and Clemson, again, those won't be easy wins, but those are at home at least. Okay. It certainly helps you out in that regard. Then after that Duke game, you've got 5 extremely winnable games. Extremely winnable games. If you're talking about a team that wins 8 of 9, all of a sudden you're kind of back in the thick of things. You're at least competing for a higher seed in the ACC. And that's all you got to do. Make your path as easy as possible in the ACC tournament, because if you rattle off a couple of wins, who knows? Who knows what happens? But right now, I mean, it's just kind of a game-by-game thing. Take care of business against Florida State Saturday. Take care of business against Clemson. You got to protect your home court. You have to. That's why that Virginia loss really stings, because if you could go out there, like, what was the thing that we said all of the non-con? They played 4 of their 10 games at home in the non-con. And that's the fewest they had ever played in the Jim Boeheim era. I guess they tacked on the 2 more against Brown and Cornell, but 4 of their first 10 at home in the non-con is the fewest ever under Jim Boeheim that they have played through their first 10 games at home. So that's something that was kind of the saving grace, is maybe you get back in the dome and you start doing some things, figure some things out. But hopefully this is the start of it. Hopefully you're starting to figure some things out defensively.
I do think they are. And you know, Jim Boeheim did say something about in his post-game press conference about the last 2 games to the effect of, we played really well on the road. We played really well against Miami, and we played really well against Wake, and those are just good teams. Really well is relative. Maybe they played really well for this iteration of Syracuse basketball. Yeah, I could maybe get behind that, but they still weren't playing like a really good basketball team.
If you played really well in back-to-back games, you're winning one of them.
Yeah, right. And his whole point was,
but you're winning one of them.
His whole point, which I agree with for the most part, is you can still play well and then just not inbound the ball at the end and lose the game. And that could mean that you're trending in the right direction, which is what I said on the most recent podcast, I think, is how this team, despite losing those 2 games, those 2 games weren't the problem. Like, if you would have told me they went on the road and lost to a good Miami team by 1 and a solid Wake Forest team in overtime, that's fine. That can happen in ACC play, where you just go on a road trip and you don't come away with the win and you play pretty tight and you lose 2 close games. It's the games before that that caused all the frustration, the fact that they needed those wins so badly. But I wouldn't say they played really well, but I would say that these last 3 games, I'm excluding Virginia because I thought the Virginia defense was terrible. To give up 74 points to Virginia is laughable. Yeah. I mean, they don't score 50, 60 against most teams. So outside of that game, since then, they played like not a tournament team, but a solid ACC team. And the problem is they need to play like a great team the rest of the way to even get in the NCAA tournament conversation.
It's probably their best 3-game stretch of the year so far. Yeah. Which it sucks because you're 1-2 in that stretch. And I get you're on the road for 2 of those games, but a blowout victory against Pitt and then tight losses against Wake Forest and Miami. Your best 3-game stretch, you need to be 2-1, 3-0. Especially with the desperation that this team needs to play with now. They need to be probably more 3-0 than 2-1 in those stretches. But when you're 1-2, like, it's really tough to dig yourself out when you're already in a hole and you're playing your best basketball, yet it's only leading to one win over a 3-game stretch.
Right. We'll get into one of the weird things from this game, which was seeing Bol Ajak come out for a little bit in the first half. Some of the interesting rotations and lineups that Jim Boeheim did, but it is the new year. So that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you'll want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars, which can be chalky or waxy or taste like a chemical spill, Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. So it is somehow as tasty as a candy bar, but a lot better for you. You can go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15. That's locked, the number 15, for 15% off at built.com.
Hey, Syracuse fans, we've got an incredible app that everyone who buys gas needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. Our listeners are making up to 25 cents per gallon at the tank for every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use the promo code SCORE and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. So don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code SCORE to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to even $300 a month in cash back, and there's no catch to it. The cash gets right to your account, and you can cash out at any time to your bank account, PayPal, or e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code SCORE to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. That's promo code SCORE.
So at the end of the first half in this game, Syracuse starts to lose the lead. Pitt goes on a 13-0 run. They get up by 7. And we see Jim Boeheim go even deeper into his bench for the first time in a while. He used 9 guys in the first half, which feels like there must be a meteor coming towards Earth or something. If that's the case, just shocking to see, but I liked it. And Bol Ajak comes in. He plays the forward spot. Frank Anselem was out there at the center spot. Symir Torrance was out there. So it was a pretty bench-heavy lineup. I know you tweeted some stuff, and you probably disagreed based on what I saw from your tweeting about how John Bol played, but I thought John Bol provided a little bit of a spark. I thought he was pretty solid out there, and I'd honestly be all for seeing it again.
He had the 4 trillion in this game. So shout out Mark Titus. For those who don't know, 4 minutes, no stats across the board. And it's not the worst thing in the world when you play 4 minutes. My problem with him was this, okay? He didn't seem like he was in the right spots at the right time. He was very heavy-footed. You could tell he hadn't been out there in quite some time and played basketball in a meaningful setting in quite a while. And just the way that he was sort of moving around out there on the floor didn't inspire a lot of confidence. But I don't blame Jim Boeheim for trying it, right? We're at the point in the season where you got to try some things out and make things work. Here's another issue that I had with it, okay? I thought when I saw John Bol go to the scorer's table, I thought to myself, okay, he's going to come in for Frank right now, right? And then he comes in for Benny. And I thought to myself, what the hell is this going to look like offensively? You're going to have Frank and John Bol, who basically have to sit in the same spot offensively, create a log jam there. I believe Torrance was on the floor too.
Yep.
So you effectively take away his one gift of getting to the basket because he can't do it. He can't shoot the ball. So he has to get into the paint. So you've got 3 guys who pretty much are going to be relying on a 5 square foot area on the floor. You've got 5 guys who can only operate out of that area because Frank was also in the game at the time too. And I thought Frank played really well in this game, by the way.
I did. Yeah, I agree.
So you've got 3 guys offensively that rely on a 5 square foot area on the floor. I just don't like that offensively. And I get you needed to pick up the defense. Okay. I get that. But to me, it just struck me as odd as how is this going to work offensively?
So I think the counter to that is taking out Benny doesn't give you much offensively right now. Sadly, he has more potential than John Bol. He's going to be a better offensive player one day than John Bol, but not right now necessarily. And John Bol moves around a ton on offense. Like watching back the game, he's constantly setting screens. So I don't think he was stuck in a 5-foot area as much as Benny probably would have been, where
I will say this,
Benny's just kind of sitting in the corner.
He was hitting guys. John Bol is one of those guys, like, he comes off the bench and he wants to be physical, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm almost surprised he didn't pick up a foul. And I wouldn't have even been mad if he picked up a foul, because it would have been one of those light a fire under your asses fouls. I don't know how much we're going to see John Bol the rest of the way, but the 4 minutes here, fine. All right, try something out. At least it seems listen, I don't think John Bol made an impact on this game whatsoever in terms of when he was on the floor, but I think he made an impact in terms of the mentality of everyone else. And I think just seeing that Jim Boeheim had to dig as deep into his bench as he did to go get John Bol to find some sort of spark on this team sort of lit a fire under everyone else, saying, all right, he's getting minutes, I got to step up my game.
Maybe. And it is interesting because hearing the SU radio crew beforehand, Matt Park, Coach Saddlein, they talked about how they went to practice yesterday, and it was pretty clear, they said, from leaving that practice that John Bol was going to get some run in the game. So I don't know if it was necessarily the way the game transpired as much as Jim Boeheim set out going to the game to play John Bol. They also said that Barama looked pretty good in practice too. And that's what Jim Boeheim said post-game. He said John Bol's had some really good practices for us, and he thought he was active out there, and he thought he did a pretty good job. And he did compliment Frank and Symir Torrance as well. It was sort of a weird lineup, I agree, to throw him out there with, but it worked. And when that lineup was out there, they started to sort of take back control of the game right before the end of the half. So I think you got to give John Bol some credit. I really thought his defense, he was pretty active, and he got in the right spots rotation-wise, and I'd be all for throwing him back out at the forward spot. Again, not every situation, but the defense that he provided, I think, is useful down the stretch. Almost maybe kind of like what we saw Robert Braswell do a little bit, where he comes out there and is at least changing things up and setting some screens and making the right reads on defense.
Yeah, I think John Bol's performance was a little more of a don't excuse activity for achievement. Just because you're moving around doesn't necessarily mean you're doing a lot of good things out there. I do think, though, Frank's defense elevated to a new level when he was out there. And Frank, I think, really, he played a really outstanding game in this one. He ended up playing 7 minutes in this game, probably could have played a little bit more. But I was surprised early on because of what we saw against Wake Forest when Jimmy Boeheim was slotted as the 5 whenever Jesse came out. And Jesse came out early in this game. And what do you know? Right away, it was actually Frank that got the minutes at the 5 instead of Jimmy Boeheim. So I thought that was a welcome surprise. And Frank went out there and I thought played pretty well. Had 3 rebounds in this game. Also, he had a steal, but I think it was more of a block than a steal. So I like the minutes that they got out of Frank Anselem. I think listen, we need to see a little bit more offensively because Jesse provided another solid offensive performance in this game. But I need to see a little more offensively, but defensively, I'm liking what I'm seeing out of Frank. I think it's going to start to warrant more of a double-digit sort of minutes output from him game to game.
Now, that was really encouraging because he needed a good game, frankly.
Yeah.
He didn't play, I don't think, at all against Miami. Then he came out against Wake Forest, and I thought had one of his weaker performances of the season in limited time, but he follows it up with probably what was his best performance. Maybe Georgetown was another game. He also had some big moments against Indiana that swayed the game more than this particular game. But if you're just looking at stretches on the court and how he played, I think this was the best he's looked in a Syracuse uniform. Probably.
Yeah, it's this in Georgetown. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and Jesse fouled out again, which is amazing because he did the thing where he had 1 foul at halftime and really 1 foul into the second half a little bit. I was monitoring the prop shop and I took the under on 4 fouls and I was ready to put it in green and give myself the win, but I should know better. He's fouled out of every ACC game
impeccable.
Now, 5 for 5.
I mean, I don't get it. I really don't. How do you pick up 4 fouls, and especially when you've got Hughley on the other side, who was in foul trouble himself? I mean, he had 4 with like 12 minutes to play. And he ends up not fouling out, and it's like once he picks up 3, he's a guarantee to pick up 4, and then it's just a matter of whether or not he picks up 5. because it almost comes in rapid succession here. Here, I'm actually going to go to the box score, like the little play-by-play here, and see like
They were bang,
Jesse
bang,
Edwards,
bang, it felt like.
like where they in succession they come, because it is egregious at this point. So he picked up, actually, he had 0 at the half. He had 0, not 1. He had 0 at the half. I'm starting to look at it right now. He picks the first one up at 19:28. Then he picks 2, 3, 4 up from the 8:43 to 5:26 mark in the half.
8:43 left. He had 1 foul. That's nuts. And he fouls out.
Gosh, it's got to be better. And you can say it's ticky tack, whatever. Like, it's got to be better.
A couple of them were bad calls. Yeah.
And by the way, so you know how I said he picks up 3, he's a guarantee to pick up 4. He picks up 3 at 5:41. He picks up 4 at 5:26. 15 seconds. And you go from 3 fouls. Like, you just have to be smarter and not touch someone at that point. I get that some are bad calls. I get that. But at a certain point, you got to know that just based on your stature, more bad calls are going to come against you than good calls, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You just got to lay off. You got to lay off.
Right.
You got to know that your presence is worth more than 2 points. It's worth more than 2 points.
Yeah, and that was something we highlighted in the preview podcast, how Pitt does, the one thing they do is gets to the foul line and gets a lot of fouls drawn on them, and Syracuse was in foul trouble in this game. Joe Girard had 4 fouls at a pretty early stage of the second half and missed a good amount of time.
Jimmy had 4.
And now it's 9 of 15 games this year Jesse has fouled out. I think they played 16, so that might be off slightly, but I believe he's fouled out 9 times looking through it, and then all 5 ACC games he has fouled out, which this one was a little less meaningful, but he still fouled out, which is pretty amazing. So, all right, we're going to get into Benny Williams and his lack of minutes in just a second. Also talk any other leftover thoughts we have on this win for Syracuse, but this is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours, but on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you want to be running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software. To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Got visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR planning, budgeting, and more. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. For the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Head to netsuite.com/locked for the special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. netsuite.com/locked to learn more about NetSuite. So Benny Williams plays 3-4 minutes in this game. I can't remember the exact total.
4 minutes.
It was not enough is the bottom line. I think you would agree. Like, he didn't look great in the first half. Then they went to John Bol, and Jim Boeheim talked about at postgame how Benny's just not there right now, and John Bol's been the better forward in practice, and that's why he wanted to get John Bol some run. But like, second half, when the game's out of reach, Jim, why not put him in there? I guess Cole Swider needs to get better too, but for me, Benny is the key to our season necessarily. He's the guy that we haven't unlocked that maybe we could unlock, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but at least try and at least give him some minutes.
I don't think I'm as mad as most Syracuse fans after this one with the minutes for Benny, and here's why: because this is a game you had to have, right? And we've seen some second half collapses. And what's one of the things that we say oftentimes about Joe Girard? If the defense is playing well and Girard is out there, there's no reason necessarily to put in Samir Torrance. If Joe is taking care of the basketball and the defense is playing well, leave Joe out there because he brings an offensive dimension that simply Samir doesn't. And when the defense is playing well, and you're as a team playing well, and you got to have the game, and you've been prone to some second half collapses, leave it as it is. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, to me, is kind of what Jim ran with here. And I don't mind that because at the end of the day, you're still sort of playing for wins and losses to a degree. Now, at the end, maybe he should have gotten the final like 3-4 minutes of action.
Definitely
here.
Then.
But yeah. I'm not as mad as most Syracuse fans because if everything was working out there, stick with it, okay? It was what was building you your big lead in this game. So I'm not as mad as most Syracuse. Listen, I want to see Benny Williams on the floor as much as the next person does. All right. I'm the one who's banging the drum on pretty much every single recap show saying, why wasn't Benny in here? Why wasn't Benny in there? But it was mostly because Syracuse was struggling in those instances. And I feel like putting him in would have provided some sort of a spark. I don't think that this team got a spark without Benny out there. So I don't necessarily see the reason for him to be put in for some of this. I'm not as like, if you showed me this box score before the game, and this is what I saw Benny Williams played 4 minutes and Syracuse won by 16, I would have been very puzzled. But after the game, seeing how everything sort of played out, I'm not as frustrated. I'm really not.
Yeah, two things on that. One, I don't necessarily think that Cole Swider was the reason why they were winning this individual game, at least. So I'm okay with taking away. I mean, Cole played 38 minutes. He goes 4 for 10. He has 10 points. Some of those where he had a couple baseline jumpers towards the end of the game, which is becoming kind of his move. But I think anyone that watched this game pretty closely would say Cole Swider didn't necessarily have his best game.
Yeah.
And he's still getting 38 minutes and Benny's getting 3. Like, to me, that's where it's like, just bring in Benny. I know Benny isn't playing well enough to deserve 20, 25 minutes. And it's just sort of puzzling because he's coming off a game where there was overtime in it, but he did play 24 minutes in a season high.
Back-to-back really good games.
Yeah, and he was out there for 3 minutes. He made a head-scratchy play on offense where he lost the ball as he went up, and he's not moving without the ball on offense because it feels like he doesn't really know how to contribute when he's relegated to a spot-up shooter, and he's better with the ball in his hands, and that's not going to happen right now this season at least, but I don't know. I mean, why not give him some run towards the end of the game, especially when it was like 8 minutes left, 7 minutes left, and Cole Swider's still out there just not really providing a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still like everything was sort of working out there in tandem. Now, I will say one thing about Cole Swider is this was a to me, maybe Cole's worst game. If not, it's definitely in the team photo of worst games here. Just because usually when you see Cole struggling from 3, as he did in this game, 0 for 4, you'll see a high rebound total. Like it's at 8, it's at 7, right? Or he'll have like 6 assists. He'll find other ways to impact the game. That was not this game. He had 2 rebounds, 3 assists. And that's just not the Cole Swider performance that we're used to seeing when he is struggling. And to me, that's why, okay, maybe it would have warranted putting Benny in right there. But if everything was going well, and why mess with a good thing? You were beating Pitt. You were starting to get a little bit of a run going on them. And there, to me, really was no reason to mess with it.
Yeah. Cole Swider, I really want him to be good because he came on our podcast and he was such a great guest. And I don't think he's been like a terrible basketball player out there, but he just hasn't gotten to the point. He hasn't taken a next step since his career at Villanova.
To me, it's people sort of want to, they've got an expectation set for him, right?
Right. Which was pretty high.
I think it's pretty lofty, right? And then there's also people who think that he shouldn't even be getting any minutes on this team. Neither of those ends of the spectrum are true. It meets somewhere in the middle. He's not an awful basketball player, but he's certainly not played like a great guy out there as well. He hasn't come close to living up to the expectations that were set out for him. So yeah, it meets somewhere in the middle on that spectrum there. But yeah, this is certainly not a good one for him.
It's kind of like Girard, where if he's playing 38 minutes and he's a starter for you, you're probably not like an NCAA tournament threat or a Sweet 16 level team. But that doesn't mean he's a bad basketball player. Like everyone rags on Girard, and I do think we've done it a little bit at times too, but the Girard Torrance conversation that keeps happening, like we got to see a good chunk of Torrance in this game because Girard got in foul trouble. Torrance was fine, but I don't see why people want an I don't want an even minute split like 20 and 20 with Girard and Torrance. And people are arguing that, and then you stop and think, let's not forget, Joe Girard has been bad at times this year. He's had some bad performances. We've been some of the first 2 people to point that out, but also the guy is literally leading the ACC in 3-point field goal percentage, right? Like he's shooting, I think it's 46%. Not even close.
Yeah.
And like he's on high volume. Yeah. And he's like averaging 15 a game. I mean, he's not that bad.
Right. In terms of like 3-point shooting, he is the best 3-point shooter in the ACC. When you, like you said, when you base it off of percentage as well as volume,
like one of the best in the country, honestly.
No, you're right. Yeah. And here's how I view the Joe Girard, Samir Torrance situation here. Okay. It's like a pinch hitter in baseball. All right. There are certain times where you need to throw a lefty up there against a right-handed
Perfect.
pitcher.
I like
All
this.
right.
Yeah.
And that's what Samir Torrance is. He's that lefty against the righty in the 7th, 8th inning. It's situational. Everything in terms of the substitutions between Joe Girard and Samir Torrance is situational. There are going to be games where Joe Girard should play 38 minutes and Samir Torrance should only play 2. There are also games where, like this one, Joe Girard should play 28 minutes and Samir Torrance should play 12. It's all situational with their minute split. It's not going to be a cookie cutter thing game by game. It's going to be what the game throws at you. What's the game flow like? Obviously, you needed to throw Samir in this game because Joe Girard was picking up the fouls and he wasn't shooting great in this game. All right, throw Samir out there because you needed that lefty out there.
I got it a lot more with Kadari. I totally understood why people were arguing for more minutes from Kadari because Kadari's a guy that can impact the game on offense as well. And we saw that in his last game for Seton Hall, especially. But for me, that's a great way of putting it. Like Samir Torrance is just too limited offensively. In a perfect world, I would love to be able to put Joe at the 2 more. And I do think he plays out of position a little bit at point guard. And that's where we see his flaws come through. And I wish that we had Jalen Carey that panned out, or we got Quade Green, or whatever. Maybe that's
Kadari
too
stayed,
dated.
and everyone bumped up a
Kadari
spot.
was it, and that's the one that we probably really wish we had right now. And I get why that's just angering the fan base. And you're right, it's Kadari that we really wish we had, but we don't have him. And given the state of the roster right now, I just don't see playing Samir Torrance 20 minutes. I'm sorry, like there are people out there that are arguing for it and that don't get my side of view, and I guess we're never going to come to level playing ground here, but let's keep in mind, Joe Girard does some bad things, but he also just does a lot more good things offensively and is still contributing in some winning ways non-offensively, like passing the basketball, which is still offense, but not shooting, that Samir Torrance is doing as well. Like Samir gets to the basket, but he misses every bunny, and he's never going to score in double figures for you when Girard scores 15 a game and is shooting great
every single game. He's a threat every single game to get you 20 points. And for a team that can be very bereft of defensive talent, sometimes you need to score 90 to beat the team that's scoring 88 on you. And Joe Girard, while he's a big factor of why the other team's scoring 88, he's going to be a big factor of why you're scoring 90 too in some of these shootout sort of games. So yeah, I'm with you. Like Samir Torrance, it's game to game with him. Okay. Like anyone who's calling for 20 minutes of a split here, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. Like, listen, he's a fine player. He's a situational bench player. I think he's doing his role to perfection. All right. When he's called upon, go out there, play good defense, take care of the basketball.
He played well yesterday. I'm not on. He has a limited ceiling, and that's all we're saying.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad we went into that little rant there at the end. That was fun. But we'll break here and then be back on tomorrow's show. I guess should talk a little bit about Syracuse getting this Michigan transfer at quarterback. Which sounds a little bit better than maybe it is, but we'll get into that on tomorrow's show. It's still good to see some competition come into the quarterback room. We'll also dive into your Twitter thoughts. There's plenty to get to from the week, from the 2 games. So if you have anything
what else we got to
us,
talk about? We got to talk about what you tweeted out too. The
Boeheim
eyes
poll?
On CBB with Norlander and who's it? Norlander and
Gary Parrish. Yep.
Gary
That was
Parrish,
the next one I was going to bring up. We got to talk about that poll because and if anyone hasn't voted yet, it actually might have already run out, but go check it out and leave a comment if you want before our next podcast, because we'll read through some of the comments on that. But I basically said the question that was brought up on the Eye on College Basketball podcast, which was, if you're a Syracuse fan, would you rather have Jim Boeheim for 2 or 3 more years or another new coach next season? And not like Jim Boeheim fired, but that's just the scenario. You had to pick one. And I haven't looked recently.
On his own terms. Yeah, he's going out on his own terms, guys. Like,
right. We know that. If you're rational, you know that. So I don't know. The poll was like 50-50 last time. I looked. I think it's an interesting question. We'll talk about that on tomorrow's show. Any other Twitter thoughts? Hit on that Michigan quarterback transfer and anything else that comes up. So we will be with you guys tomorrow on the show. Thanks for listening today, and we'll talk to you then.